watching one of those binge eating channels, and this guy is skinny. It's Joel Hansen, and he's skinny. You can always tell these people that eat these mega portions of food. Right now, he's eating $300 worth of seafood, and then they'll go and barf it up 10 minutes later, which is a shame and a crime. The way you can tell that is you look at their teeth, because the gastric juices, when they barf the food back up, strips the enamel off their teeth. Like that girl that does the binge eating. I'm not talking about hungry fat chick. She pretty much she pretty much eats a normal portion. She always over orders her food because obese people always worry that there's not going to be enough food. That's a psychological thing. And they always look over their food and they survey it. And when she does a collab, unless there's a lot of food, it's a nervous collab where the other person isn't sure whether they're eating too much, that she doesn't want them to compete as far as eating so much of their food. It's a very nervous thing to watch, but she said she made some good cheese this year. I watched her latest KFC video, and she's right back into the same old rut of, eating fried food and smoking 420. And I noticed in the background she got a oxygen canister now. So that's good in a matter of speaking, that she knows she's oxygen deprived. And she said she's doing her taxes and she made a boatload of money and all of her bruises are healed up. So that's good. But the topic tonight is Trump. He's supposed to be arrested on Tuesday, and he knows about it. And apparently, he's going to turn himself in or something, But the whole thing about our political system now is whoever they don't like is going to go to jail. Anybody that they don't like, if they keep on competing with them, is going to go to jail or accidentally commit, accidentally bump themselves off, like all of Hillary's competitors. And the one guy committed SUICIDE by shooting himself in the back of the head with the shotgun. Hey, how you doing? So how do you pull that off, shooting yourself in the back of the head with the shotgun? And they ruled that, as SUICIDE. This platform is so ridiculous where you can't say certain words or else you get deplatformed, But fam, come on. Don't be naive. Don't be naive. Donald Trump is a germaphobe. And if you think that if you think that he had a fling for real, with Stormy Daniels, a girl who's had more ding dongs in her mouth than the Hostess Donut Factory. Hey, how you doing? Again, tonight is adult content. We're talking adult content. So the warnings in the title. From time to time, things have got to be discussed. And that's because we no longer have a two-party system. We have a one-party banana republic. And if you get in their way, or if you do anything to tick them off, you know, you're going to be deplatformed or you're going to be canceled. I'm doing okay, thank you. I've been dealing with nausea. I've been dealing with nausea all day. So for older people, nausea can be high blood pressure. So I took an extra dose of my high blood pressure medicine to bring that down and drank some ginger tea. Ginger is great with nausea. It works actually better than Compazine. I want to give a shout out also to my Ohio peeps. And I want to repeat the video I did. Thanks, I appreciate that. I want to repeat the video I did about the quartz blue light thing on Amazon. So this blue light, the ultraviolet light, will break up the dioxin that's in that poison that got spilled into the water in Ohio. So if you have a pond or a stream, you can get a few of these. They're a little bit over $20 a piece on Amazon, and they're meant to clean aquariums. But it's ultraviolet light. Don't get the LED because the LED doesn't work. It has to be quartz. And these are submersible in water. So you just put it in the water and you turn it on and you let it run, and it'll break up all of that dioxin that's in the water. And you know, fam, that stuff is going to get into our food and milk and animals and everything. So don't believe what they tell you that stuff is safe. What do I use mine for? That's a good question. This stuff also, blue light will kill any germ or virus or bacteria in the air. So I have an air scrubber from Honeywell, and it's right behind me. The white one is a HEPA air filter, and then I have another one in the front of the room, and it has ultraviolet light that the air blows over. So the air is scrubbed with the filter, then it's scrubbed with the carbon filter, and then it's scrubbed with the ultraviolet light. And you can put these up in the A coil of an air conditioning system, and it'll kill all of the mold and the fungus and the bacteria and germs. It'll kill everything. The only caveat is you don't want to look directly at the light for too long, because it will age your retinas in your eyes. So, yeah, it is good. So if you want to have one of these running all the time, I have a pair of blue blocker glasses, which are those yellow glasses. So when I service the unit, I can look right into it without hurting my eyes and burning my retinas out as if I need anything else to happen to me. So, but fam, like I said, and I didn't catch any flu or anything that everybody else um got. I got the stomach bug a couple weeks ago, and my small still voice told me where the origin of that was. Man Raj went to McDonald's for me and got me 2 crispy chicken sandwiches, which was nothing more than a piece of chicken on butter bread with pickles. No, I don't have a CPAP machine yet. The CPAP machine is $1,000, and it's on my Amazon link if any of y'all want to get a church or some sort of organization to split the cost. But I'm not pressed about it. If I really need it, the good Lord will provide. I just make sure I lie on my left side at night and start out breathing deep. And then I set the alarm for the middle of the night to wake myself up so that I don't fall into a permanent sleep and not wake up. And I sleep with the lighting on just the way it is here so that I don't have a seizure. Because back when I could stand up, after the accident, I found that I had to shower with my eyes open, because if I was in the shower with my eyes closed, the room would spin around violently. And the weird thing is after the accident, if I was in the shower with hot water running on my head, right here feels ice cold, like somebody is holding an ice cube there. It's a really weird sensation. But now I have to sitz bath in a wheelchair after that guy punched me in the spine and immobilized me. I still exercise. I have my barbell and I exercise every day. I'm disciplined about that. And some people, they come to my site and they don't watch any of my videos, and they're like, well, why don't you go jogging or something like that, and leave a real nasty criticism. Well, you wouldn't have that stretched out neck, and you wouldn't be all bloated if you went jogging. And sometimes I feel like getting nasty back and saying, yeah, and you wouldn't be in my position either if you hadn't gotten run over by a recycle truck. But I don't even, the unfortunate people and the haters, I don't even respond to them anymore, because you're just wasting your breath. I just press that wonderful remove button. And that takes away all my stress when somebody gets unfortunate. And the thing that really bothers me about my channel, to tell you the truth, is you have the two guys and every day it's like the Dukes of Hazzard. It's the same thing. Nick is gone. Nick is back. And well, I try to be gentle because the Holy Spirit is gentle. But this guy and Nick, it's always Nick is gone, Nick is back. Nick does his belly dance and he takes a room full of food and whacks it with a broom and ruins this whole room full of food, And see, when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, if you read the word carefully, it says that God not only destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah for sexual sin, but because they dined and they ate sumptuously and they didn't take care of their poor. And that's what really ticked God off. And you have these eating channels, and these people are well, thank you. These people are eating these massive amounts of food, and then a few minutes later they're throwing it up. There's no way they eat all of that food and keep it down without busting their gut. You couldn't eat 36 hot dogs, because of all the fat and the salt and everything would kill off your heart. So they go into a bathroom and they barf the food back up and waste all of that food. And you got to figure now, fam, a third of the world is starving. Even in America, people are starving. It used to be a fourth of the world was starving. Now it's a third of the world. So I'm on a budget after they cut my benefits, $294. My benefits got cut. And see, I paid into this system for over a half a century, and I was promised no, Candy knows me. She's not going to respond. Candy doesn't do anything that's inconvenient, believe me. I sent her some sporks one time, never got thank you, go to hell, kiss my butt or anything. She never used them. So when somebody does something like that, I don't send them anything else, if I don't even hear a thank you back. The most wonderful thank you I got was from Tommy Bites Homestead, and she was having problems with her internet. So I sent her internet repeater and strengthener, and I didn't put from Pop Pop or anything. She made a thank you video that would make you cry. She was that grateful. So I don't want to get into name calling as far as Candy is concerned. Candy said she had a rough upbringing and she was brought up by her grandparents. Her mother aborted like 6 babies, and Candy was number 7, and for some reason she didn't get aborted, but her mother had issues, and so it made for an unpleasant childhood for her. But everybody has that kind of thing in their life. When I was 2 years old, my brother and I got horribly burned at the beach. Hey, how you doing? And my brother and I got burned at the beach to where we had these bubbles where our skin was actually crispy, like we had been cooked in an oven. And my mother stripped us down and wrapped us in sheets with Noxzema cold cream. You figure this is 1950, so it was different back then. Nobody went to the hospital or the doctor. I broke my ankle in a football game, and my mother took me to the neighborhood doctor, and his 14-year-old son wrapped my ankle back up. And I asked the doctor, is that going to be okay? And he was like, yeah, the boy does a good job. And they didn't do the best job, and my ankle is bigger at the bottom because, it didn't get professionally packed and everything. But, I mean, it worked for a while. But, see, from 2 years old on, I was estranged from my father because after we got burned, My father took Old Spice cologne and he dumped it in his hand and he slapped my brother's burns the next day. And my brother was eating a grilled cheese sandwich like a little squirrel, keeping to himself. And he threw the sandwich up in the air and ran out of the room. And my father thought that was the funniest thing in the world. And you know, fam, if I smell Old Spice, 60 some years later, it still makes me barf. If somebody has Old Spice cologne on, I can't hang around them. My father had been terribly, terribly abused, and he had issues like he pulled the feathers out of a bird, plucked all the feathers out of it, just like he was pulling petals out of a daisy or something. He pulled all the feathers out of a bird when he was a kid. His father dropped he and his mother off in the middle of a bridge back in 1917 and drove off. Now, a car back in 1917 only did 35 miles an hour top speed. The average speed limit in 1917 around town would be like 15 or 20 miles an hour. So could you imagine dumping off your kids and then you're going to make your getaway in a car that you could almost chase after on foot? That had to have been a scene where my grandfather dropped my father off on this bridge in a Model T, and then it took like a half hour for him to get away. So, yeah, it helps if you smash that like and subscribe. I forget to sometimes, when I'm on other people's channel, but that's just because I'm older than God. So I don't stress about it or mess about it. But everybody has that stuff happen. And then when I was 11, my father punched me in the face and knocked me down the basement stairs and then stood over top of me and beat me like we were in a bar fight. And that was because of Norman Lear's show. And I disrespected my mother after watching TV. And, my mother looked like Edith Bunker. So I got in the habit of telling her stifle. And my father was like, "What'd you say to my wife? What'd you say to my wife?" Boom. And they didn't play. My father, when I was a kid, he told me, he said, "If you can't get along in this family, I will be happy to drop you off at Junior Village," which was his make-believe foster home. So he threw me down the stairs, beat the crap out of me, almost killed me. 13 years old. 11 was a bad, bad year for me. 11 was a bad, bad year for me. I got molested by a guy that I used to cut his grass. And he got me drunk and I wound up in bed with him upstairs. He told me to take his laundry upstairs. And he gave me a Gibson, which is a martini with an onion. And I had a beer that he gave me, and then the martini was some sort of something in it. And I woke up with him cuddling me in his bed. I never told my mother, but she figured things out. She said, "I don't ever want you going back to the guy's house," but he'd give me $50 or $60 for cutting his grass and polishing his silver and stuff. But then he would go off to Thailand and Bangkok and get with little boys on government expense because that was legal back then. and probably still is now. And then 13 years old, I went to a listening camp, and this stuff gives me the chills even recounting it. I went to a listening camp where we had to duck walk, and then they had you stand out in the sun with two empty buckets, and they told you do exactly what I tell you. And even if you said yes, sir, he said, "Did I tell you to speak?" "No, sir." "Okay, that's twice." They put some water in the buckets, so by the time they fill the buckets up with water, and you got 30 pounds of water on each side of you, so you're holding up 60 pounds in the heat for 20 minutes. By the time they let you put those buckets of water down, your arms are like spaghetti. And one boy wet the bed, so they put him outside with the mattress, and they turned the hose on him. And I came back very thin because the older boys would eat the food. You know, they had these marvelous pancakes and eggs for breakfast, but the older boys were taking great big piles of food. And by the time it got down to us younger boys, there was hardly anything left. One of the camp counselors, Steve, was a pedo. And when I looked in my photo album, Steve always had two boys under one arm and two boys under another arm, and he would throw himself back on a bed or a sofa with the boys on top of him. And see, we didn't know about that stuff back then. All I knew was that something was off about this guy. But that kind of stuff really scars you. I went to work full time when I was 14 years old in a Esso station, and my father did not allow drinking or cussing. He would beat you to death for that. But he did allow smoking and coffee. But when I worked at the Esso station, I worked around men who farted and scratched themselves and spit on the ground and stuff I was never used to. And everybody called you boy back then. Everyone's hung up on being called boy. But back then, if you were young or you picked up garbage or you shined shoes or something, you were called boy. So the men told me to change the bottle on the water cooler. And back then the bottles weren't plastic, they were glass. So the glass weighed 5 or 10 pounds. 5 gallons of water, 5 gallons of water weighed a gallon of water is 6 pounds per gallon. So that's 30 pounds of water plus the bottle is pushing 50 pounds. And what the men did was they put grease around the bottle. And when I grabbed the bottle to change the water, the bottle shot up in the air and then came back on the machine and broke into a million pieces. And I had to pay $10 for that bottle. Now, I made $9 a day, so that cost me a whole day's pay to pay for that blasted bottle. And the men were like, haw, 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 haw. And I was picking the glass out of the water, and I was like, I'm not drinking out of this anymore. Y'all are going to drink the water that's got little bits of glass in it. I'll pick the glass out as best I can, but I'm not drinking out of that thing anymore now that I know it's got glass in the water. So they shot themselves in the foot on that deal. But they did all kinds of mean little tricks and stuff. they bought me a hooker. Here I was 14. They bought me a hooker, and the girl came from Frederick, Maryland. She had a 65 Ford station wagon, and it had pillows in the back, and it had a blanket. And you could cuddle with her for a half hour for $10. And she gave me a hug and a French kiss, and it tasted like beef stew and cigarettes. And when you think of where her mouth had been and what her mouth had been up to, it still gives me the shivers even to this day. So the men started taking me out to clubs. And see, this is over a half century ago. You never got carded if you were big and you were greasy and everything, working in a gas station. And they took me down to Shepherd's Park and the Arts Theater where you watch porno shows and stuff. And I grew up when I was 15, I got the boot. I grew up around drug addicts and prostitutes and all sorts of horrible stuff. I went to work on a garbage truck for $20 a day, which back then was big money. And there were men that were raising their family on that much money, $20 a day. And they would ride you out to the route. They would put 6 or 7 men on a garbage truck, and the older men got to ride up in the cab. The younger men had to ride in the back of the truck sitting on the garbage. And hey, how you doing? And the younger men had to ride out to the route sitting on the garbage, and people would drive by in traffic and they'd go like that, or they would roll down the window and they would say, why is the company throwing you in the garbage, ignorant jokes that you'd hear 1,000 times. There was no bathroom breaks or anything like that. If you had to go to the bathroom, you had to do it discreetly, standing next to the side of the truck, hoping that nobody is looking and hoping that you wouldn't get arrested if a cop came by. And they didn't have plastic bags back then. They gave you a piece of burlap and you put it on the ground and you dumped all the garbage in the burlap. And people in the summertime would sweeten the garbage with lime. So when you picked the burlap up, the garbage and everything, the heat would make it run down your back into the crack of your butt. And the lime gave you these horrible burns on your skin and sores because of the garbage. So when you got off the route, you had to wrap yourself in the burlaps. You twisted them and you wrapped them around your belly and your shoulder. And then the truck dropped you off behind the houses to pick the garbage up. And see, I wanted to be a doctor, fam. I had no idea that I was going to spend 25 years on the back of a garbage truck. And in any case, there were no plastic bags, and you had to use these dirty burlaps. So I wore the top of a rain suit to keep the yuck from going down my back. So I looked like an idiot with these brown coveralls and a yellow rain suit, humping garbage. And there was a restaurant we went to. Hey, Hungry, how you doing? There was a restaurant that we went to, and the girl behind the counter, Barbara, she didn't have any teeth. she would go, Tater, you in here eating again, boy? You in here eating again, Tater? And she called me Tater because she said that I looked like a great big baked potato with the brown coveralls. And the guy who owned the restaurant didn't like me. I'm good, thank you. The guy who owned the restaurant didn't like me, and there was a very obnoxious Freddie Fender song on the jukebox that he didn't like. So I put $1 worth of dimes in the jukebox, and I pressed the button and pressed it 10 times so that the song would play over and over and over again. And the guy was in the back of the kitchen cooking, and he looked up and he wiped his hands on his apron real angry, and he came out to the where all the tables and chairs were, and he punched me and knocked me into the candy and donut display. And then he went over to the jukebox and yanked the cord out of the jukebox and looked at me like, do it again, boy, I'll kill you. So, like I said, 15, I got the bump at home, and I was out on the street, and somebody would have mercy on you and buy you a meal, and they would say you don't have to pay them any money. And then the man would say, well, how are you going to pay for the food? And as a kid, I'd be like, well, you said it was free. And the guy'd be like, well, nothing's free. You got to talk to the judge. You got to talk to the judge, boy. Pay me back for that meal. And so I got used for sex and god awful stuff. And my channel is all about keeping it real, But I never did drugs. I never did drugs because I had to depend on myself. And the boss of the garbage company, he said, you're going to smell as bad as the truck if we don't get you a place to stay. So he got me a place to stay at a halfway house, and the men were raping each other and taking a horse. I can't tell you what horse is. You got to look it up for yourself. Because if I say the name of the stuff, I'll get kicked off the channel. But the men were cooking horse in a spoon. And being a dumb kid, I came into the dining room and I asked them what the experience was like. And this Jack Nicholson looking guy came up behind me and he grabbed me and put his arms around me. And the other man who was cooking the horse, he licked his thumb and he put it on the inside of my arm. And man, when the vein popped up, they shot that stuff in there. And I was very sad because I was estranged from my parents. My parents, when they kicked me out, they went out of the country on vacation. Everybody my whole life was like, well, Will's going to be okay. Will's going to be okay. And so I was drinking this great big glass of vodka and orange juice. And when the stuff hit, it felt like hot water rushing around my legs. And I stood up to run. And all I remember is seeing the glass of orange juice go slow motion towards the floor and me right behind it, like that. Bam. And so they dragged me off to bed and put me face down on my bed with a barf bucket, next to my bed. I woke up 2 days later. It was a miracle they didn't kill me with that stuff. I woke up 2 days later with a bucket full of barf next to me. and the bed was as wet as if you'd soaked it with the garden hose, and I had a very sore butt. So I decided to move out of the halfway house and go back to sleeping in the back of garbage trucks and cars, and I tried sleeping under the garbage truck one night, and some jerks took firecrackers. Hey Katrina, how you doing? Some jerks lit off some firecrackers and threw them underneath the truck and woke me up. Pop, 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 pop. So I decided, well, to be safe, I'll set up housekeeping on top of the garbage truck. So I took the key to the garbage truck out, and I put a beach chair on top of the. Hey Heather. I put a beach chair on top of the garbage truck with a towel and went to sleep on top of the garbage truck, watching the stars and everything. It was very nice. But I woke up, the mechanics had gotten another key off of the board and started the truck up, and they knew I was on top of the truck. And they decided to drive the truck around the yard with me on top of it screaming. They thought that was so funny. Ho, 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 ho. And one of the men had a 62 Corvette Stingray, the year where the nose looked like the saucer off of My Favorite Martian. And it was in primer gray. And being hardworking, I had a brand new Ford that sat way up. It was a Ford Galaxy 500 with a police interceptor motor. It was green on green on green, and it had these great big pusher bumpers on it because it was an ex-cop car, but it was a detective's car, so it didn't have all of the screw holes in the dash from the shotgun and everything. It was a detective's car. So every time I would go to get in the car, this guy would park his Corvette about 5 or 6 inches behind my Ford. And then I would have to go into the shop and ask him to move it and wait for a half hour for him to come out. He wouldn't move the Corvette. He would just say, come on back, come on back. And I would have to, manipulate the Ford back and forth to get out of the parking spot. So one day it was like 104 degrees out, and I had picked up garbage all day, and I was in no mood to be messed with. So he came out to tell me, mum back, and the Corvette was behind the Ford. And I had one of those looking into the camera moments, and I got the idea. So I put the Ford in reverse, and I pushed the gas pedal down halfway, and the Ford had all of this tension. It was like, come on, Will, I know what you want to do. Just let me go. And I let my foot off of the brake, and the Ford came back, and it went right up the top of the hood of the Corvette with the gas tank of the Ford resting on the Corvette with the rear wheel spinning. And I opened up the door in a very, fresh way. I said, oops. Sorry, oops. Well, the guy didn't think that was funny. John's mother, fourth child, the first child was called Monday, second child Tuesday, third Wednesday. I don't know. But in any case, he grabbed me out of the car. Bam, 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 bam. Laid into me. And I was on the ground like, you know, because he sucker punched me. But I'll tell you, the next day when I went to get into my car, that Corvette was all the way across the parking lot. And I told the guy, I said, look, you don't call the cops on me for running up on your Corvette, and I won't call the cops on you for assault and battery. We got a deal. He just walked away, but that was the end of the problem with him. But the next thing was 17 came around, and they let me graduate school. By the way, they gave me credit for what's called life experience, and so I was able to go to the graduation ceremony with all of the other kids, and being flush with cash wasn't a problem because I was hardworking, and I bought the flowers for the graduation. And the guy the young man who did everything for the graduation, the flyers and all, John Genn, he didn't give me credit on the schedule for the flowers, just to spite me. And then I got an invitation from him years ago to go to a graduation get together, as if. So, 16, I started working for 2 garbage companies, and I would drive the truck with the forks, and then I would get on another truck and hump the garbage on my back. And I worked for 2 garbage companies, and I went back to college, and I took business administration and management. So you young people that say you can't do it, you can't do this, you can't do that, I was on the street and I still went to college. I pulled the Ford up behind my father's when the Hondas came out, my father bought a Honda CVCC, which was as big as a coffee table. And I pulled my car up behind his like my car was going to eat his car. And he came to the door and he said, "Oh my God, you bought the biggest thing that you could buy." And I never played my hand. I never told my parents that I was sleeping in the car. So, in any case, 17 rolled around. That was a bad year. I taught my oldest sister how to drive, and she started taking me to bars and porno theaters, and she was very amorous. And I bought her a Jimi Hendrix glitter shirt. She took her top off right in the middle of traffic to put the Jimi Hendrix glitter shirt on. And as she was wiggling into it, of course, everybody in the intersection was watching us, and it almost caused a horrendous wreck. And so we would go to a porno theater or a hotel or a bar, and she would slip her shoe off and run her foot up into my crotch or rub the inside of my leg. And that got out of control. And it was like we were dating each other. And my mother one night, she said, don't go to the Ramada. And my parents didn't have anything to say about it because I wasn't living at home. And she said, don't go to the Ramada. Hey, New York, what's up? So as it turned out, some men with GUNS came into the cocktail lounge and robbed everybody. And I stopped going out with my sister. And then when we would have a family picnic, when the Lord started working on me, I'm tolerable, thanks. When the Lord started working on me and I had a realization of my sin, I couldn't look at my sister. And she'd come over for a picnic and I'd be there. I would just get up and leave. I'd get up and leave. And 17 was a bad year. I was going with this young girl, and she had a little boy that I had planned to adopt, Timmy. Timmy was 2. I was 17. Ann was 16. And and I was very close. I was very close to Timmy. We went to Enchanted Forest and all of that other stuff. I put Timmy on the moon bounce, and when he got off, I grabbed him off of the moon bounce and lifted him up to me, and he stuck his foot out, and it caught under Ann's blouse, and it lifted her blouse all the way up over her head. And everybody in the crowd laughed at us, and she was furious. And I said, well, we'll never see these people again. Don't worry about it. But in any case, Timmy was playing in Grandma's driveway one afternoon, and Ann had pulled our station wagon up. We had a Chevy Caprice Estate, 1967, all steel, massive car, about 4,000-pound car. She left it running in front of our boy. And the other kids in the car reached over the seat and they put the car in drive. And the car came up and hit our boy and stood over top of him running for about 15 minutes before Ann came out to get in the car and go back to what she was doing. So she came out and she got in the car and she backed it up. When she looked up the driveway, she had run over our boy again the second time, so he was long gone. She called me over at my parents' house. I was there on a truce. I had gotten into a fight, and I had this big black eye. This guy and I, we almost beat each other to death. He got me down on the ground, and I had bought a new car, and he piddled on the car in the winter time and in the fall or whatever. And he got up on the back of the trunk of the new car and he piddled on the back window. And I told him, I said, when we get someplace alone, I'm going to yank you out of this car and I'm going to beat the crap out of you. So when we left the bar, I was going up this back road, Avery Drive in Rockville by the dump. I was so angry, I put the car into park, and the car was bouncing because it was still moving when I put it into park. I walked around and I pulled the door open. I pushed the seat forward so hard it threw the man that was sitting in the seat into the windshield. And I reached him back and I grabbed the guy out and I punched him in the face and knocked him in the gutter. And as he was going down, he grabbed me. We both rolled into the gutter, and he reached up with his cowboy boot and he kicked me in the nose and broke my nose. It's still got a piece of bone that sticks out under it. He broke my nose, and then he got over top of me. He started picking on one eye, almost blinded me. And I believe God was looking out for me because This guy had to be an angel. I look up and there's a cop, and he looks down. He says, "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" And we're both like this, face to face, locked in mortal combat. He goes, "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" We both go, "No, no, officer." He says, "Well, I suggest you better get in that brand new car and get the heck out of here." So we get in the car and there's beer cans up, brand new car, got scratches on the trunk and pittle on the window, and beer cans all over the dash, and cigars and cigarettes all burned into the upholstery and the carpet. Brand new car. And I drive off thinking, well, this cop is going to let us drive like 50 feet and then he's going to turn the lights on and take us to jail. But when I look back, cop car was gone. I didn't see it back up. I didn't see it go around us. It was gone. And I still think that was an angel that God sent to keep me from getting killed. You know, because we should have gone to jail. But in any case, I went over to my father's house and he wanted to take a picture of me, his big, rough boy in a flannel shirt with the black eye. And he was actually kind of proud because my parents were blue bloods. My father was a poet. My mother was an Egyptologist. And my father and I had like a business understanding. We didn't do any lovey-dovey in our family. I called my mother Alice. I called my father Buck. And after everything he did to me, he'd want to read me one of his poems. And he read me this poem that you're no closer to God than when you're in your garden. And I said, well, you're closer to God if you're buried in your garden. And he was like, yeah, you smart aleck, you know. So that's kind of the way we got along. I would later on take him out to lunch and buy him a nice lunch. And he would say, how are things going? And I'd say, fine. How are you doing? Good. So the conversation was good, fine, fine. Then he would call my sister and he'd say, well, Will and I just talked about everything. And we never said anything more than good, or fine to each other. And then when he got older, he'd go like into the kitchen to go to the bathroom. I'd have to get up and go get him. I'd be like, Dad, this is the kitchen where they're cooking the food. Let me take you to the bathroom. And I would think how afraid of this man I used to be. And one day when he died, I went to the restaurant and I was looking at my watch waiting for him. And then I said to myself, stupid, he's dead. He's not coming back. And I got this real hollow loneliness because I'd never had that relationship with my father that I wanted. But I had other men. I'd had other men who got with me and bought me food and then got with me later on. And again, this is a family channel, so I won't go into it, but it's by the grace of God that I wasn't murdered and thrown into a dumpster or something like that, you know. But like when people say they had it rough, I had it rough and I came out a decent person. You know, I've not injured anybody or talked down to anybody or anything. So when somebody says, well, you know, they grabbed a GUN and they went into a school and polished off a whole bunch of people because they felt they were entitled. I never felt entitled with everything that happened to me, you know. And believe me, when when you have some older man, when you're a 15-year-old boy and you have an older man buy you a cheeseburger and a Coke and then wind up on top of you, taking out all of his passion, you know, I can't even say anything about that. And most guys say, well, when I was young, I was molested, and they leave it at that. But I was raped. I was raped, and I mean not gently either. So uh, for my family gets really upset when I speak about this stuff because they don't want it. They don't want it understood that my parents put me out and then went out of town on vacation, out of the country. And see, I've forgiven them. Hey, 420, how you doing? And hola. And see, the grace of God was that when my father was dying, my family, they were like, that was too intense for them. And my father got left at the hospital. And as a matter of fact, when he was on life support, and my family was there to discuss taking him off life support, which they did, the attendant looked at my family and he kinked the air hose going to my father. He kinked it in half, and the machine has an alarm. It goes blah 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 blah. This awful blah 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 noise. And the guy looked at my family like, if you unplug this machine or if you kink the cord, the machine's gonna set off an alarm. And my sister was so loving that she had my father's pets put to sleep at the vet because the cats went all through the house, meow, meow, looking for Buck. And my sister had no intention of Buck ever coming back home and her having to change his bed and fix his coffee and all that. She was done with Buck after, several years of looking out for him. Hey, how you doing? And so even before, hey, how you doing? So even before Buck ever would have come back from the hospital, she took the cats to the vet and had them put to sleep because they were inconvenient. And so I went to the hospital and Buck was there stone naked because it was easy for the hospital to work on him that way. And I could see by the instrumentation that he was really in a state of agitation. And I told him, I said, that's my father. You got to cover him up. You can't leave him on the table like a piece of meat just because it's convenient, on a gurney with no mattress and no sheet, like he's already going to the morgue. And so I grabbed his hand and I said, Buck, I said, it's your boy. I'm right here with you. I said, go ahead and go. I said, it's not going to hurt. It's going to feel a little bit like buzzing. And I said, just let go. I'm here with you. I'm holding your hand. I love you. And see, that was very difficult for me to say back then because my father and I really technically never reconciled. We went out to lunch and he would vent on me and I would vent on him because he would want me to think that his poetry was important to me. But he never said, son, I'm really sorry for knocking you down the cellar stairs and beating the crap out of you. And when our boy died, Ann called me and she said, Will, Timmy's dead. And I collapsed. I went, oh, God, my boy's dead. Oh, God. My parents never said, we're sorry. They never put their arms around me to hug me or anything. I left and I got in the car. And when my grandmother died, I was there for my father. And my father had bought this Mercury X100. And it was in the grossest color. My father had a thing for money green. He felt that if you were driving a green car, you're showing everybody the money. And this Mercury was a money green with a green interior. But it was a Mercury X100. And my father comes out, his mother died. She actually pulled the tubes out at the hospital because she wanted to go. She was tired. She pulled the tubes out and they let her go. And my father gets in the car and he starts the car up. Brum, 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 brum. I'm like, Buck, if you want to go someplace, you got to put it in gear. He puts it in gear and the car goes, Arrgh! And we're both like thrown around on the inside of the car. And I'm like, Buck, you're going to put this thing in a tree and kill us both. Let me drive, man. You got to let me drive. No, I'm okay. And really, I was panicked. I almost reached over and turned the key off, but what could I do? It was a big car. I said, well, this car is huge. I'll put my seatbelt on. If we hit a tree or something, I got like a 50-50 chance. He's driving along in the car, swerving. And man, that's when I got good at comforting somebody. Hey, Buck, she's in heaven, man. She's better off, and just calm down, man. She's with the good Lord. And I became an expert, believe me, in 15 minutes of calming somebody down and giving them encouragement. That became my thing. But the point being is that God gave me the grace to forgive my father and be on his deathbed, bless God, and say the right things and comfort somebody who had brought me so much agony in my lifetime, in my young life. And my parents broke up after I left home. They were like, well, once we get this last one out of the house. They put my brother out when he was 17. He went into the service with a whole bunch of problems. And they put him out at 17. They put me out at 15. 15. So I only visited my parents' gravesite twice. When my mother died, she had walked out of the Catholic Church when Roe v. Wade happened, because she bought the lie that a baby was just a clump of cells and could be scooped out of the mother like seeds out of a pumpkin. She literally got up and walked out of the church, never looked back. So when she died, my family had to pay the Catholic Church to do a service for her. When we rolled up, the Catholic priest was smoking a cigarette. He had a green Isaac Lacoste shirt on and black kilts. The little dress thing. Total disrespect. My brother was hysterical and he was laughing. And I grabbed my brother up because we were pallbearers. And I said, if you don't stop laughing, I'm going to have to smack the crap out of you to bring you around. You make it seem like you're some sort of pervert laughing at your mother's funeral. I said, get it together. And that's the way it was with me. I always had to be the one that was telling somebody else to get it together. But I didn't have anybody at the time to go to the funeral with. And I knew this real pretty prostitute escort girl. She was high class. She didn't do the normal stuff. She was big money and very beautiful. She looked like Helen Crump off of the Andy Mayberry show, and very proper, actually. And I sat in the back of the limousine just bawling my eyes out on her shoulder. And she's there petting me, looking straight ahead, very prim and proper. We didn't have anything in between us. Nothing went on. And I knew a couple of hookers, and they were very nice. One was a nurse, Martha, who worked at the local hospital. And she tricked in her nurse's outfit because some men had a nurse fetish. And she had a nurse's uniform and a mink coat and a Cadillac Biarritz. But she was smart. When she took the men someplace, she had them in her car so that they couldn't kick her out and stiff her. We were all at Tasty Diner in Bethesda one night, 1 o'clock in the morning. You know, because when you're homeless, there's no place to go. And so we were all at Tasty Diner, and Martha got done with her meal. She grabbed a $5 bill from one of her Johns and gave it to the old woman behind the counter. And that guy went off. How dare she give the old woman such a big tip? And she turned to the guy and she said, unless you want to walk home, you shut your mouth and get in the car. She handled her business. But otherwise, she was a very nice lady. And she really was a nurse. But, and I didn't snob on people. If somebody was a prostitute or hooked on drugs or something, I did the best I could to help them. I lived in a ghetto apartment in South Baltimore, and there was a girl upstairs who was loose. And I had a good friendship with her. And I used to have a yard sale each week to drum up money. And down on a string comes this beautiful lunch of macaroni salad and a hamburger and baked beans. And Gail had lowered the lunch down to me on a string while I was having my yard sale. But by the same token, I would see a bird cage go up past my window, and the bird cage had money in it, and then the bird cage got drugs put in it and lowered back down to the street. And so I would be looking out my window and I would see this bird cage going up and back. But I'm going to say this and then I got to go. I went to my mother's grave site, and when I walked up to the grave, the ground was loose and it swallowed me up right up to my knees. And I was trying to pull my leg out of the mud. And I was like, no, Mom, I'm not ready to go. No, let me go. And it panicked me so bad. I never went back until my father's funeral. And so when they buried my father, I got out of the... Oh, okay. So when they buried my father, I got out of my Lincoln and I walk up to the gravesite. My family kept me away from my mother because I might upset her. So I sent my mother while she was ill. She only lived like a week or 10 days before she died. I sent my mother the most expensive color TV for the bedroom for her to watch. And that was my way of saying I was sorry she was sick. And I never got anything back from the family. No thank you, kiss my butt, go to hell. And normally when you give a gift like that and somebody rejects it, they send it back. But my father gave the very expensive TV to my sister, who had tried to stab me when I was 11, over $20. He gave her the TV set for $50. Never heard a thank you, kiss my butt, go to hell or anything. So I'm going to say this and then I got to go. I go up to my father's burial. Yeah, I did. I go up to my father's grave site, and this huge botfly, I mean, that sucker went right up my nose. And so it was in my sinuses buzzing around, and I was going, trying to get it out of my sinuses and cough it down into my mouth. Because I'd read one time, all right, bud, good night. I read one time that this lady got a bot fly up the nose, and the fly laid eggs, and the eggs turned into grubs, and they ate her brain, and she wrecked her car and all this gross stuff. So with that in mind, I got the fly down into my mouth, but there were all of these people watching my unusual behavior. So I didn't want to spit the fly out on the ground and have people think that I was spitting on my father's grave. So I go booking back to the Lincoln, throw the door open, and I get a coffee cup. Good night, Heather. I get a coffee cup out of the console, and I spit the fly into the coffee cup and kind of rinse my mouth out with a little bit of coffee, spit back in the cup. And there's this big dead fly in the cup of coffee. And then I go back and give my father my final regards, get in the Lincoln and leave. But never got any, gee, I'm sorry or anything from my family. And so when my father passed, he turned all purple and blue, purple around the mouth, but the machine, the life support was still going. It was 11:30 at night, very creepy. And so he's there, stone cold dead, and the machine is going, psh, bah, psh, bah, psh, bah, like Darth Vader. And I literally felt, I would say maybe hundreds or thousands of beings go through me from the window, collect my father, go through me back out the window, and that was that, out into the night. And very unusual feeling, very unusual. And like I said, I give God the praise that he allowed that to happen, and for me to finally, at 80 years old, for my father and I to have that defining moment when all was forgiven, even though he couldn't say anything. And I popped open a can of Coca-Cola, opened up a package of peanut butter cheese crackers, called my family. I said, your father's gone. 11:35 is the time you put down on the record. Your father's gone. They didn't say, well, we're sorry. Are you going to be okay to drive home, Will? None of that. Just click on the other end. Click on my end. Got into the car. Took the ticket off of the windshield. And drove off into the night. You know, I used to give blood at NIH, and I would park underground And I came out one time after giving blood, all shaky and lightheaded, and this big brother came up, security guard. You ain't allowed to park down here. You ain't allowed to park down here. And I said, I just gave blood upstairs. There's a parking lot down the street. I said, well, sir, you not going to, officer, you not going to, he's like, sir. I said, well, sir, you're not going to see me again. So I'm not giving blood and walking a quarter of a mile to the car. So he takes his billy club, and he whacks the back of my car. I had this beautiful blue Olds 98 diesel. And I love that car because it was so big and luxurious and everything. And you would start the car up, it would go, then it would go clack, 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 boom, and this big plume of smoke would come out the back. So the officer made this big dent on the trunk of my car with his club and gave me a ticket. And again, I took the ticket inside the car, $25 ticket after I'd given blood, which was the last time I ever gave blood at NIH. But I was the first one to roll coal, to roll smoke on somebody, because when he stood right there to make sure that I left, and I knew that he was somebody who wasn't feeling a pinky. That's what it came down to. I mean, be real, fam. He wasn't feeling this pinky, banging on my car and everything, knocking on the window with the billy club thing. And so I started the Oldsmobile up. Clack, 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 clack. And you could make it roll smoke if you choked it out while it was trying to start. And you just held the accelerator all the way down. And if you turned it on before all the lights went out, it had more lights on the dash than the nuclear reactor. It had water and fuel light. It had do not start. It had fasten your seatbelt. Will, all these horrible things are going to happen to you. Nuclear core meltdown. All of these great big square thing with yellow and red lights on the dash of this Oldsmobile. And you start it up and all the lights are supposed to go out. And all the time it's going like that. And then it's going ding, ding, ding until you fasten your seatbelt. But the car had terrible blind spots, and I would never fasten my seatbelt until I had looked backwards to back the car up. So I turned the key on, and it says wait to start, water and oil and water and fuel and all this. Don't start yet. I started up. Clack, 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 clack. And every time it clacks, it's puffing out this big, belchy black smoke. Clack-a-lack-a-lack-a-lack-a-lack-a-lack-a-lack-a. And I smoked that guy like a codfish or like a tuna, whatever. I smoked him good. And when I was waiting to get out of the garage, I made sure that I held the gas pedal all the way down to the floor so I would roll coal on that sucker. It's like the Boys in Company C, where the guy's up in the tree after getting blown up, and the sergeant turns to the boy, he says, you're dying. And he turns back to the sergeant, he says, yeah, he got me, but I got him. And Boys in Company C was originally, my brother and I went to see it. It was supposed to be a comedy. And this guy got his balls blown off during the WAR. And that's why they pegged it as a comedy, because the guy got his balls blown off and one of the other men found his balls And they were like, well, you can't put them back on. So he took them and he threw them. And that was supposed to have made the movie a comedy, dreadful movie. Like the time I went and took my girlfriend, Bonnie, to see this movie called The Immigrants. And it was about people coming to America and they were all throwing up. And this little boy snuck into the grain room and he ate all this grain and then drank some water and the grain puffed up and blew his stomach up. And she was like, really, Will, you took me to see this? And see, back then I found out that Ford made 7 key combinations to their cars. So I get out to the parking lot and I had this beautiful white Ford LTD with a blue interior and a blue top. And Bonnie and I go to get in the car and I unlock the door and we get in the car, but the ignition key won't work. It goes in the lock, but it won't turn. And the car looked different. It just looked a little different. And then I looked over my shoulder and my Ford LTD was 2 rows over and 3 cars back. I said, Bonnie, we got to get out of this car. This isn't my car. So we get out of the car and she says, Will, you're such a poop. You're such a poop. Taking me to this movie. And then we get in the wrong car like we're going to get arrested. So I unlock the right car, look back at the other one. I'm like, man, that's incredible. We get in the right car and drive off. Last time I ever saw the girl that did it for her. But speak of being done, Pop got to go. It's getting late for me. I got to change and get ready for bed. I love you all. The good Lord loves you more. Pop out.